All right, good morning, everybody. We are going to convene our State Canvassing Board, and I would note for the record that the Governor Gordon, is present with us, Treasurer Meier is present, Auditor Racines, and myself, Secretary of State Buchanan. We are convened today as the State Canvassing Board pursuant to Wyoming law. We are to meet no later than the second Wednesday following the election. And we're going to review the state abstracts that were prepared by my office and certify the abstract as the official state canvass. And the state abstract of our election will indicate by county the number of ballots cast by each political party, if known, the total number of votes cast for each candidate, the names of all write-in candidates receiving a sufficient number of votes to affect the result of the election, and the number of votes for each, and the number of votes received for and against each ballot proposition. Before we get into the summary of the canvassing matters, I'd like to take this opportunity to tell the public that this was one of the most successful elections in Wyoming's history. We had the highest voter turnout in Wyoming's history for our primary election. And we had very few issues, some interesting things as far as some power outages and some things that Mr. Schoen will describe, but nothing that's really out of the ordinary and nothing that our staff and our office can't handle, and certainly nothing that each of Wyoming's 23 county clerks can't handle. Once again, my staff and all 23 county clerks demonstrated their professionalism. They demonstrated how good they are at what they do, and they demonstrated how they can kind of fix problems that come up on the fly and be creative to make sure that Wyoming's elections work as the citizens expect them to work. And then finally, when Mr. Schoen is done with his presentation, you will see that Wyoming's elections are fair, they're secure, and we have many examples of that to tell you about today. So with that, I would turn it over to Mr. Kai Schoen, my elections director. Mr. Schoen and his staff, we have a staff of 3 in elections. And if you can imagine that in any state, where do you have only 3 people who can do such an outstanding job for their elections? And before I let you go, I also want to give kudos to the staff, because folks may not realize we were there until 1 o'clock in the morning on the 16th. And that includes everybody in my office, because we have teams that get this information from the county clerks. So it's all hands on deck for the Secretary of State's office, 31 employees, all contributing to the success of Wyoming's election. So people need to know that. So with that, Mr. Kai Schoen, Election Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, State Canvassing Board. This meeting is also being streamed online, so the public can also participate that way and view what happens here today. And I would certainly echo what Secretary Buchanan has already said. With the staff at the Secretary of State's office, with 3 members of our team, it's an impossible task without the entire office coming together. Can you hear me okay? I'll get closer. Okay. There we go. They need to raise these a little bit higher for some of us here. So yeah, my hat goes off to the staff as well. I'm very appreciative of their work. I'd like to give some preliminary information and just a brief overview of the conduct of the election. It doesn't require any action from the board, but just information that I think is important, information I think you would like to hear. With the election behind us, we have now conducted 3 elections on the new equipment that we rolled out statewide in 2020. Counties are still very, very grateful for the new equipment. And overall, the equipment performed very well. I'll give you some instances of how it was tested and how it prevailed. As in years past, our office has provided 2 support staff from ES&S that are on site and ready to go if need be to any county. So we have the state plane that's held in case of any kind of emergency or just situation that needs hands-on attention. And so we had them in our office. Everything was able to be handled at the local level. And some counties had their own on-site support staff as well, which worked well for them and for us. Leading up to the 2022 elections, Secretary Buchanan spent a considerable amount of time traveling the state, as you may have heard, conducting election integrity and security presentations to various audiences. And the purpose of those presentations, again, was to dispel common election-related myths, clarify just the election results reporting process, and address any misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, MDM as we endearly call it now. Everything needs an acronym these days. And he provided facts about Wyoming's elections and further educated Wyoming citizens. It was amazing to me how much education was incredibly helpful to understand the process, to trust the process, and to alleviate many concerns that were out there. There was also a virtual presentation that was conducted for an organization with statewide membership, and 2 additional presentations were actually conducted before the Wyoming legislature in this room here. And so thank you, Secretary Buchanan, on behalf of our staff, on behalf of literally Wyomingites, for standing up for the truth and dispelling those lies and for protecting the integrity of our elections. There are a few situations that were encountered on Election Day, 3 to be exact, that are worth noting and don't, again, require any action from the board. In northern Lincoln County, there was a polling place at the Thane Community Center. It lost power due to a car that crashed into a power line nearby. So these things do happen. We're prepared for those things. The machines have a battery backup, which immediately kicked in, so there was no disruption in voting. Also, in the meantime, their emergency manager, they facilitated a generator to get out to the site, which continued to power that building. And shortly before the end of the day, that power was restored. So there was no disruption whatsoever to voting taking place, even when a disaster such like that took place. In Hot Springs County, this was my first phone call of the day, actually, on Election Day. It was 5:30 in the morning, and I was on my way into the office, and a new clerk out there in Hot Springs County. I'm thinking this is a terrible thing to have happen to a new clerk, but she handled it very, very well. There was, at the Thermopolis Museum, there was a flood in their polling place, and so they became aware of that around 5 a.m. that morning. And fortunately, it was fresh water. There was a leaky pipe in the bathroom from the supply plumbing, and it had just flooded the area. They tried to clean it up, but they realized that wasn't going to happen in time, and so they posted notice on that building where the new polling place was going to be for those 2 precincts that were affected by that. In fact, it was the annex building where the commissioner meeting room is across from their courthouse. And they got everything up and running by 7 a.m. and everything ran smoothly. We didn't even receive a single phone call from a single voter about what had took place there. And so she handled it with grace, handled it well, and everyone was able to vote that wanted to out there in Hot Springs. In Laramie County, at the Archer Complex, there was a tabulator that jammed, and it was unable to receive ballots for just a short period of time. And when the jam occurred, the clerk staff at the polling place, or the vote center, contacted the clerk's office, and the clerk's office instructed them to use the auxiliary bin. And the auxiliary bin, it's on every tabulator, and it's for situations like this. It allows the voter to fill out their ballot. They place it in the auxiliary bin, and there's a separate compartment in there that'll hold those ballots until the jam can be cleared. And then election judges, bipartisan election judges, they can retrieve those ballots when there's a downtime in the vote center, and they can run those through the tabulator, which is exactly what they did. As soon as that jam was cleared, they ran all those ballots through, and they looked at the counts on the tabulator, and they reconciled it to the counts on the poll books, and they reconciled 1-to-1. And so that's a great check that we have. In fact, throughout the day, that's what election judges do in every polling site. They're constantly reconciling the number of ballots cast to how many people have checked in at the polls, so we always know we have a 1-to-1 ratio. And even further, this is just kind of kudos to the Laramie County Clerk. When those ballots were then returned to the office, clerks have the statutory authority to run a retabulation. It's different from a recount. The retabulation has a singular purpose for reconciliation. And so they ran all those ballots through again, even on a different tabulator, just to see what those counts were, and they were identical to what took place at the Archer Complex when they ran them through that day. So kudos to the Laramie County Clerk's office. Also, just for reference, there were over 302 tabulators that were being used statewide, and we had 1 jam. And so that means 99.7% of our machines had 0 issues, and 100% of them by the end of the day were fully functional and tabulated every ballot. These issues and how they are remedied are direct proof of the integrity of our county clerks in the elections in which they run. There are contingency plans that are in place by statute and by rule. Emergency managers ready to assist in any situation, and clerks have statutory authority to retabulate for purpose of reconciling. We certainly have an election system that we can be proud of and that we can trust. Further, and what's one of the biggest wins, I think, for election integrity in this primary election was piloting a new post-election audit in all 23 counties. We'd begun actually conversations about this new post-election audit shortly after the August primary in 2020, so before anything from the 2020 general election even became a reality. And prior to this election and running this new post-election audit, the audit we had in place in statute, it essentially audited a small percentage of tabulators after the election using the same test ballots that they use in their public test before the election. And so the idea there was if those tabulators are tabulating with 100% accuracy before the election, they're tabulating with 100% accuracy after the election, what took place during the election should be with 100% accuracy. So that was the idea there. But our office wanted to be really proactive, maintaining voter confidence. And so we wanted to go beyond auditing test ballots. And so that's what this audit did. And we ended up working with the University of Wyoming's Department of Mathematics and Statistics. Professor Giroux, he's the director of the program in statistics, was eager to help us help us out, because our office, you may not believe this or not, but our office is not made up of mathematicians. We like to call ourselves statisticians, but we certainly do not know all these various algorithms, binomial distribution, equations, and all of those things that we look to them to be experts in. And that's what Professor Giroux provided for us. He provided us a mathematical tool that considers the race with the closest margin of observable difference to determine a sample size. And a sample size is simply a contest on a ballot. And we would audit a significant enough of samples to say that we have a 99%, again, this is math, 99% confidence level in the election result. And so I'm happy to report, and we'll get more into it later, but that in all 23 counties, there were no issues reported in their post-election audit. Every ballot that was selected at random was adjudicated with 100% accuracy. And so that was pretty exciting for us. It's an incredible feat. Again, speaks to the integrity of our equipment being used across the state. And there's information, as I was alluding to, in regards to this in your audit summary packet. And if you have that here with you, whether electronically or if you had printed it out, we can actually turn to those summary packets at this time. So this summary packet, it draws out the key components for this overview as it relates to the statutes pertaining to the canvassing board. In fact, I provided another set of statutes there in front of you here this morning because that wasn't in the packet. My apologies, but it is there before you now. It talks about the post-election audit, voter turnout, as well as the agenda. And while you're referencing the summary packet and looking through that, I'd like to add, in regards to the equipment, because I missed this, that our equipment has been federally certified, and it was tested to this rigorous standard that the Federal Election Assistance Commission puts forward. And one of their tests, one of their standards is these tabulators have to actually tabulate 1 million ballots without an error before they can ever be deployed into the field. And that's a statistic that many people are not aware of, and I think it's incredibly important to understand that these tabulators, we're not going to tabulate 1 million ballots in the next, 10 election cycles, right, here in Wyoming. And so we've got incredible equipment. So in your summary packets, after the cover page, you'll see the agenda for this morning, and we're actually already on the first, we've gone through the first 3 bullet points on item number 2. And after the agenda is the summary information on the post-election audit, which I was just referencing. And I wanted to also point out, if you turn to that summary page of the audit, is that statewide, we audited nearly 18,000 contests, which translates into nearly 3,000 ballots that were selected at random. And all of those were adjudicated with 100% accuracy. So it's pretty compelling. It really should drive home the point, and I don't want to sound like a broken record up here, but even further that our machines are accurate and really they ought to be trusted. After the post-election audit summary in your packet is the total ballots cast, which are broken down by county with a total participation of 182,232 voters. And as the chairman has already indicated, that is actually the highest turnout we've seen of voting age population since 1994, and the most ballots we've ever seen cast at a primary election in Wyoming's history. It's quite a feat. And in fact, there's also another number on there on that top row for 2022 that references registered voters. And that's a number that our office generates before the election even takes place. And that number of registered voters is the most registered voters we've actually had in the history of Wyoming, including primary and general elections. And I would also say that following this election, we'll break a new record because on election days, you know, in Wyoming we have election day registration. And so the clerks are actually processing those now. They have 30 days to do that. So that number is just going to go up. So we will have more prior to the general election and break another record, which is pretty incredible. There were 84 races on each party ballot. There's 1 federal, 5 statewide, and 78 legislative races. 56 of those races had no candidate filed, which means there really was a potential for 56 write-in candidates to be nominated. However, the board only has 2 write-ins to consider for nomination later on here this morning. Additionally, there are 57 uncontested races. And on the next page in your packet, after the voter turnout, you'll see the primary election candidate breakdown. Kind of interesting to look at. There was a total of 190 candidates that chose to participate, 8 federal, 17 statewide, 34 Senate, and 131 House candidates. And if you turn to the next page in your packet, and it's in relation to recounts, you should have statutory references there. And in accordance with 22-16-109, there was a mandatory recount in House District 2, where the difference in votes was less than 1%. And in House District 2, it was between Alan Earl Slagle, who had 1,718 votes, and J.D. Williams, who had 1,705. So a recount had to be conducted. And it was conducted in Goshen, Niobrara, and Weston County. There was no change in Goshen or Niobrara County, and Weston County did report a difference of 1 vote less for Alan Earl Slagle, bringing the official result to 1,717 votes for Mr. Slagle, 1,705 votes for J.D. Williams, which in accordance with the statutes, if the recount yields a different result, the recount is the official result and therefore confirms that Mr. Slagle was the winner of the House District 2 Republican nominee. In regards to our statewide voter registration system, again, it performed very well, allowed our office to generate registry lists as required by statute. And with that bit of an overview, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like to walk the board through the 2022 statewide primary election abstract. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The statewide abstract, it was verified, was compared, reconciled, audited. The first section, or the first PDF, if you're looking on it digitally, that we provided for you. In fact, we're going in order of those PDFs as sent to you. There was 24 pages of total ballots cast. The first page is the total ballots cast by statewide. That's broken down by county, by party, with the totals at the bottom. And you'll see again that we have 182,232 total ballots cast. Following the statewide total ballots cast is each county's total ballots cast, which is also broken down by precinct and by party with the totals at the bottom. And if you wanted to cross-reference, you could look at any total ballots cast for one of those counties, go back to our statewide total ballots cast, and you'll see the same number is provided there. The next section is only 10 pages long, and this contains the statewide candidates summary. And again, each race, it's broken down by county and by party. The first race is for U.S. Representative, with the Republican nominee being Harriet Hageman, and Democratic nominee being Lynette Grable. The second race is the gubernatorial race, with Governor Mark Gordon being the Republican nominee, and Teresa A. Livingston as the Democratic nominee. In the Secretary of State race, Representative Chuck Gray was the Republican nominee, with no Democratic nominee. In the state auditor race, Auditor Kristi Racines was the Republican nominee with no Democratic nominee. In the state treasurer race, Treasurer Curt Meier was the Republican nominee with no Democratic nominee. In the superintendent of public instruction race, Megan Degenfelder was the Republican nominee, and Sergio A. Maldonado Sr. was the Democratic nominee. The next section is 17 pages, and that contains the statewide summary of the 16 state Senate races that were on the ballot, again, broken down by county and party. Totals at the bottom, and the winners are in bold and underlined. And the next section has 69 pages, and it contains the statewide summary of the 62 state House races. These are the most legislative races we've ever certified, following redistricting, as you may have noticed. And those are broken down also by county and party with the totals at the bottom, and the winners are bolded and underlined. The next section is the largest section, and the joke gets old when I say we're going to look at that line by line because it's 425 pages long, and it's the precinct-by-precinct results organized by county and party with the totals at the bottom. And the final section we'll get to here in a minute is the write-ins, and I'll present that here shortly. But Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'd recommend that the board take action on certifying the statewide abstract as the official state canvass.
Board, may I have a motion to certify the statewide abstract as the official state canvass?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
It's been moved by Auditor Racines. May I have a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by the governor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, the final section, it's the write-in results. The write-ins are in two separate files. There's one for statewide and one for legislative write-ins. There are 13 pages of statewide write-in results for the Democratic offices of Secretary of State, State Auditor, and State Treasurer. However, as surprising as it is, there wasn't one candidate that received 25 votes across the state to be a write-in nomination in any of those three statewide races. And it's kind of amazing. Only 25, but that threshold was not met. The legislative write-in summary, it's composed of only 4 pages, and the remaining action items on the agenda is to certify the statewide write-in abstract and offer the nominations to the 2 write-in candidates, one for House District 41, the other for House District 45. And if you turn in your summary packets the write-in statutory requirements, you'll see that a write-in must meet 3 requirements in order to be considered a nominee to the general election. First, they must meet, as we just spoke of, the threshold of 25 votes. Second, they must be a registered voter in the party on the day of the election. And third, they must receive a sufficient number of votes to affect the result of that election. And that third requirement is what is provided in the statutes that were on the table there for you when you walked in here this morning. If you turn to the next page in your summary packet, you'll see the first write-in candidate for House District 41 Democratic nominee, Jen Salas. She met all 3 of the write-in requirements with 30 votes, being registered as a Democrat on the day of the election and received the highest number of votes for that race. The second candidate is for the House District 45 Republican nominee, Nate Martin, who received 32 votes. And if you include the other 2 iterations that you'll see on that page, he arguably had a total of 38 votes. But nonetheless, he achieved the 25 vote threshold. He was registered Republican on the day of the election and received the highest number of votes for that race.
Mr. Chairman.
Governor.
And thank you, Mr. Schoen, for all of this. I know that you have the 2 iterations of Nate Martin's name, Nathan Martin, and just Nate. Is there a process that you go through to make sure that all of those comport with what the voter's intent might be in the write-in category?
Mr. Chairman and Governor Gordon, it's actually a determination for the State Canvassing Board to make which of those iterations should be included together. And certainly Nate Martin with 32 votes on its own satisfies that requirement. And Mr. Chairman, at this time, then I'd recommend that the board take action and consider certifying the statewide write-in abstract as the official write-in canvas and to offer the write-in nomination to Jen Solis, Democratic candidate for House District 41, and Nate Martin, Republican candidate for House District 45.
Mr. Chair, I guess following the question that I just asked, I do note there are a couple of other Nathans in the canvassing report here for write-ins. And so with approval of the canvassing board, I would recommend that we only include Nate Martin and Nathan Martin, not just Nate, which would then make the potential total 37 votes for Nate Martin. I don't know if that's an appropriate motion, if that should be part of just the move to certify the statewide write-in abstract. So I'll stand by for your recommendation, sir.
Mr. Schoen, do you want to address that in the motion? Could it just be Nate or Nathan in the motion? Or what do you think?
Mr. Chairman, absolutely, it could be Nate Martin. That has the most votes, certainly been garnered under that name. And if we took that on its own, the other ones wouldn't satisfy. So it really is how the canvassing board wants to list his name in the motion. I would suggest Nate Martin.
Mr. Schoen, thanks. And so if that's the case with the understanding of the board, where's my motion here? I would move to certify the statewide write-in abstract and the legislative write-in abstract as the official write-in canvas, and to offer the write-in nomination to Jen Solis, Democratic candidate for House District 41, and Nate Martin, Republican candidate for House District 45.
You've heard the motion. May I have a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Auditor Racines. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? That motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, just a couple of final remarks as it relates to the general election coming up here in November. We currently have 13 minor party candidates that'll appear on the general election ballot, 1 for governor, 2 for U.S. representative, 2 for the Senate, and 8 for the House. And currently we have 2 independent candidates that have already qualified with the threshold of signatures to run for the House as well. There'll also be 2 constitutional amendments on the general election ballot. And again, following this meeting, our office will produce the meeting minutes for each of your signatures. And upon the final signature, the state abstract and the minutes will be filed within our office. I'll personally make connection with the 2 write-in candidates and offer the nomination. And my team will prepare the certificates of nomination to be delivered to all the successful candidates in this primary election. Mr. Chairman, with that, that's the end of my presentation. I'd stand for any other further questions the board may have.
Mr. Chair, one quick question. Mr. Schoen, what are the 2 constitutional ballot measures?
Mr. Chairman, Governor Gordon, I can read them to you. So Constitutional Amendment A is the Wyoming Constitution allows the state to invest state funds in equities such as the stock of corporations, but does not allow the funds of counties, cities, and other political subdivisions to be invested in equities. The adoption of this amendment would allow the funds of counties, cities, and other political subdivisions to be invested in equities to the extent and in the manner the legislature may allow by law. Any law authorizing the investment of special political subdivision funds in equities would require a 2/3 vote of both houses of the legislature. And then Constitutional Amendment B. Currently, the Wyoming Constitution requires the Wyoming Supreme Court justices and district court judges to retire upon reaching the age of 70. This amendment increases the mandatory retirement age of Supreme Court justices and district court judges from age 70 to age 75.
Thank you, Mr. Schoen. Mr. Chairman, I want to note for the record that the first constitutional amendment, actually, both of them would have to pass by 51% of the votes that are cast, not just registered voters, but the votes that are cast. And I just note that it's been a long time cherished effort of mine to allow towns and counties to have the opportunity to invest in a way that can help them get better returns. And Mr. Treasurer, I know that's something that you also have worked on. And this is an admonition to towns and counties to get out there and lobby for this thing, because otherwise they stand to not make as much money. And in the cases of where they've set aside some trust monies for things like maintenance, that is a really important issue. Thank you, Mr. Schoen. Thank you for the personal point, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just
Mr. Treasurer.
a couple of things. I'm wondering, we had a lot of write-ins, but invalid seemed to be the best vote getter. So I'm just wondering what qualifies as invalid.
There's a gentleman by the name of invalid that, no, I'm kidding. There's,
Yeah.
so invalid, that's a case where they'll sometimes fill in the oval. They'll write blank on the line, or if the oval is filled in and it's completely illegible, you can't read anything that's on it. And sometimes they just simply fill in the oval and there's nothing. And so there is literally no valid candidate to produce. So.
Okay, all right, I'm just curious there. One of the things I'm curious too is about what's the absolute latest that we could get the ballots printed, because we've in the past we've had candidates withdraw and their name still appears on the ballot, and it's caused some confusion from time to time, and not sure if there's consistency between different voting areas. And I'm not even sure if it doesn't happen that often. I don't even know if we actually have a policy or a statute that provides guidance on that. So to me, the best way to handle it is to print the ballots, if it's 3 weeks ahead or 2 weeks ahead, whatever would be the shortest time period, so their names never do appear on the ballot.
Mr. Chairman and Treasurer Meier, as it relates to that issue, there is nothing in statute that says on this day is the day to print your ballots.
Mm-hmm.
The statutes do have a reference, of course, to 45 days when absentee voting begins. So the clerks have to have ballots in possession 45 days prior so they can meet their federal requirement to get to UACAVA voters. And so the way that the statute is written, if someone withdraws and those ballots have already been programmed and or printed, then the clerk only needs to post notice that they have withdrawn. And so that's how that has historically worked, and that's what the statutes require. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? All right. I would now open it up to public comment if anybody wants to comment. Looks like the microphone's on, just identify yourself and.
Sure. My name's Kevin Lewis. I'm from Laramie County.
Welcome.
And I regularly attend these meetings. And I would like to mention my county clerk is here, Deborah Lee in the corner, who did an amazing job in Laramie County as well. So, and I attended that canvassing board as well. So this election has one of the largest primaries. In many ways was more of a general, simply from the amount of people that went Democrat to Republican, an amazing amount. And certainly would like to understand how much that was. If I had to make an estimate, it'd probably be about 14,000 Democrats became Republicans in this election. So, and it has consequences on primary elections and whether the primary is really a good nomination process for that party. And would be good to do some research on that topic. The other thing that happened in this election that was surprising, the Secretary of State's office, Mr. Chairman, changed the amount of information that could come through request through your office. Voter history was no longer available, nor information on absentee balloting. That's a big concern for election integrity. The Wisconsin legislature hired a special counsel. One of their findings was to have all that information available for the public to see in Wisconsin. And we went the other way, and it's something to consider in future elections. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Mr. Lewis. Any other public comment? All right. I don't think we have the ability to take any online, do we? Micah, anybody? All righty. Okay, well, that concludes the business of the State Canvassing Board. And so if there are no other issues to come before us, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, before we do that, I just want to compliment your office and your staff, as well as the various clerks around the state and their staffs, and especially those people who spend a day being election judges. My daughter has been an election judge and knows how dedicated those people are to making sure that their votes are correct and proper. And I just I want to just publicly recognize the great work that was done across the state to make sure that we had a fair and secure election. So.
And any other comments or
I would
Auditor Racines?
Second the governor's comments, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Treasurer, anything? Good.
No, it's, I think that all in all, I think that the process was handled quite well. And I do have some of the same concerns about that were voiced by Mr. Lewis, you know, as far as getting information about who voted where and how. That makes a big difference in running a campaign. And I think it makes a big difference in outside auditing of campaigns. The more information that's transparent, I think the better. I think that we'll probably have to have some statutory direction for your office to accomplish that. So that's something that we need to ask our legislators to try to get a little more transparency.
Thank you. I would just close by saying I hope everybody realizes, especially everybody listening across the state, how lucky we are to live in Wyoming in the sense of elections, because we're still able to do a lot of things the old-fashioned way because we have a small population, because we have only 23 counties and we have a great set of county clerks, and we're able to collaborate and know each other, if not personally, through acquaintance somehow. And we're really blessed to live in Wyoming, and just wanted to close with that. So with that, may I have a motion?
I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you. You've heard the motion. May I have a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved by the governor, seconded by the treasurer. Any comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, we are adjourned.